Presenter of Insight, Jenny Brocky.
Hi, and thanks for joining us. And welcome to the Museum of Australian Democracy at Old Parliament House in Canberra, where we've come to discuss a big future project, the National Broadband Network. The NBN is the biggest infrastructure project in the nation's history. Its cost is estimated at $43 billion. The idea is to install a fibre network across the country, delivering broadband at record speeds. So, is it worth it, or is there a better, cheaper way to improve internet access and services? Tonight, we're joined by Communications Minister Stephan Conroy, the Opposition spokesman Malcom Turnbull, Independent Tony Windsor and others. And do join in via Facebook and Twitter. Welcome, everyone. Good to have you all here. I want to start, Stephan Conroy, with you and with some basics, because I think there's been quite a bit of confusion about what the NBN actually is. How is this fibre network different to the copper network that we use for telephone and broadband now?
Well, copper's been a fabulous piece of infrastructure for most of the last 60 and 70 years. But we're coming to the end of the copper era. We're coming to the technological limit that copper can provide, particularly when it comes to broadband. Even now with ADSL 2+, you need to live within about 1,500 metres of an exchange to get the full benefit of the ADSL 2+. If you live more than 4 kilometres from an exchange, you can't get ADSL. And even the next iteration called VDSL, you need to live within 900 metres of an exchange. So copper is coming to the end of its technological usefulness.
So what will fibre do?
Fibre allows you, it doesn't matter how far you live from the equivalent of an exchange, you get the speed that you purchase. So if you buy 10 meg, you get 10 megs of speed. If you buy 100 meg, you get 100 megs of speed. So fibre travels at the speed of light. It's what all of the international cables are made of. It's what the major backbone routes are made of. So it's a future-proof technology which allows the upgrades as new technology comes along. They're the boxes, to use real scientific jargon. You've got a big fat pipe of fibre and you've got boxes on the end. And as the new technology
and the boxes are at people's houses.
Boxes are at people's houses and in the exchange. And as technology progresses and upgrades, you don't need to relay the fibre. You just take the boxes off at each end and put new boxes on. That's a very engineering way to explain it.
Okay, so the cable will run mostly underground, the fibre network will run mostly underground?
Well, now we've reached an agreement with Telstra, the heads of agreement, which many people will have heard of, will use exactly the same footprint as Telstra use today. That's about, I think the estimates are about 66% underground, but still about 2/3 of Telstra's existing copper network is above ground.
Okay, and NBN Co, the National Broadband Network Company, corporation or company, is the wholesaler.
That's right.
So it's the wholesaler. It provides that service to a variety of retailers.
Yes.
Okay. And those retailers are people like Optus and iiNet and Telstra and so on. Yep. So you want a brand new network underground, replacing all the copper wire to nearly every house in Australia?
93% of Australian homes, businesses, schools and hospitals will get access to the fibre network. The remaining 7% will get a next generation wireless technology and satellite technology. So everyone will get an improved broadband experience from the National Broadband Network.
Okay, and bear with me everyone, one more question, because I think we just want to try and get all this clear. If people agree to get that fibre network brought from, say, the street, you know, it gets to the street, to a box on their house now, in the first instance now, with the rollout, there'll be no charge for that stage of the process.
That's right. At the moment, it's a free piece of fibre to connect to the side of your house. Then if you choose to take up a service,
you've got to pay.
You then do a deal with your retail provider and they will come and install the box and they will provide the equipment inside your house, and then you just plug into the new equipment.
Okay,
now, that will be part of an ongoing contract.
Yeah, but you're still going to have to pay, and we'll get onto that element of cost later, because there are a whole lot of ranges of costs here. There's the cost of the network, there's the cost of the retail service and everything else. Malcom Turnbull, I want to come to you now. You've been very patient listening to all this. You've been given the task by your leader of demolishing the NBN. Do you really want to do that?
Well, I think Tony was talking about demolishing the government's argument for the NBN, and I'm really simply interested in getting the facts on the table. Everyone is committed, everyone certainly in the political world is committed to having broadband, fast broadband across Australia, available everywhere, not just in the cities, and available at an affordable price. The question is, how do we do that most cost effectively? How do we do that in a way that promotes competition? How do we do that in a way that is efficient and fair to everybody, including the taxpayer? Now, my argument with Stephan is not about the merits of broadband. We all agree with that. Heaven knows, we're all committed to that. My argument is that he has decided to go down this route of building a massive $43 billion government-owned monopoly to build this network without doing a cost-benefit analysis, without looking at different options. I mean, how do we know this is the best way of achieving it? How do we know we wouldn't be better off, as I believe we would be, incrementally filling in the black spots in the city where broadband speeds are not adequate, investing in rural and regional Australia to provide broadband services there, and in terms of the bush, the policies of the two sides of politics are pretty much the same. We're both committed to that. So the real question is, how much taxpayers' money do we spend? Do we need to spend it? How can we do it in a way that protects the taxpayer and delivers us the broadband we need? Okay,
now you're moving a private member's bill and you want a detailed 10-year business plan on this. You also want the Productivity Commission to do a cost-benefit analysis. You've said if the Productivity Commission gave the NBN the ticket, would be incredibly persuasive, are the words you used. Yeah. Is it conceivable, do you think, that the Coalition could support an NBN if there was such a report and the results came out?
Look, I think if the Productivity Commission gave this a very big tick, it would be incredibly persuasive, and I think most people would expect everybody to support it then. That would be incredibly persuasive.
So you would expect the coalition, do you know the coalition would support it if that happened?
I'm reasonably well informed. Barnaby Joyce said that if the Productivity Commission gave it a tick, he would grow wings and fly around the room and support it. So there's a very big commitment from Barnaby. But the real question is this. This is the biggest infrastructure investment in our nation's history. Now, Stephan's government has said again and again that major infrastructure projects should be subject to rigorous cost-benefit analysis. His government set up Infrastructure Australia to do precisely this, do precisely this job of identifying infrastructure priorities and doing cost-benefit analyses. And yet the government refuses to undertake a cost-benefit analysis on this, and yet this is the biggest project in our history. It's a huge amount of money, and we should be dealing with it responsibly.
Okay, Tony Windsor, you're a big supporter of the NBN. It was very important in your decision on which way to go in the election. Which way are you going to go on Malcolm Turnbull's private members' bill? Do you think we've done enough work to work out whether this is in fact viable and whether there is, cost benefit in it, whether the productivity... would you vote for his bill, his private members' bill?
Probably not, but I'll leave that until I see Malcolm's bill in the Parliament and listen to the debate. I spoke to Malcolm this morning and also to Tony Abbott last night about talking to the Productivity Commission. I have some issues in relation to the assumptions, and Malcolm agrees that you're making an assumption about future technology that may be able to use the fibre cable at some time in the future. So I don't know whether Gary Banks has a crystal ball in terms of what these services, the fibre optic cable will be used for in 5, 10, 15 or 20 years. So I try.
So does that mean you've got doubt? I mean, you're sounding like you've got doubts. So what does that mean in terms of your position on the NBN at the moment?
Well, I've got doubts about the Productivity Commission. I'm a great supporter of the National Broadband Network. I think it's the one piece of infrastructure that I've seen from a country perspective that actually can negate distance as being a disadvantage of living in the country. We talk about paradigms in this particular parliament, or changing paradigms. I think this is the one thing that can actually do that in terms of doing business, health, education, a whole range of other things.
But do you think enough work has been done on working out whether it's worth the $43 billion and whether it's worth doing the way that it's being proposed?
Well, I'm not the government. I've looked at the McKinsey report. I know there's going to be other documentation coming out. I think I know Malcolm's got genuine concerns about this. But Tony Abbott's agenda, in my view, is to stop it, not just to check it, but to stop it. And I think there's enough information out there now for me to support it.
Okay.
There are some 102 studies around the world, from the OECD, from Germany, from Finland, from you name it, 102 studies that all talk about productivity are up 0.5%, 1%. That means $5 to $10 billion per year extra to the economy. There is a lot of work done around the world.
Okay, Mark.
Yeah, but the problem is there's been no work done here. And the real issue is this. This government has said that cost-benefit analysis is really important. And what a cost-benefit analysis is, you first identify what the problem is you're trying to solve. So let's say we want to get fast broadband in the bush. We want to make sure it's available in the cities. We want to make sure that it's affordable. Let's say that's our objective. We all agree with that. What a cost-benefit analysis does is say, let's look at the different options for achieving that, see what can be rolled out most quickly, most cost-effectively, most prudently. Now, that is what sensible people do in the private sector, but I'm afraid to say, it's a shock, I know, that sometimes politicians, when they're dealing with taxpayers' money, are not so responsible.
Okay.
And I think they should be.
Okay, response, Stephen Conroy. Why not do that sort of study?
Well, firstly, as Paul Butti's just said, there's studies all around the world which demonstrate the positive benefits of broadband to productivity, GDP growth and jobs.
Stephen. There aren't studies that demonstrate moving from broadband to very high-speed broadband, and that's what this debate is about.
So there are plenty of studies all around the world that demonstrate this. Access economics, not a Telstra study, as Malcolm incorrectly claimed in Parliament today, commissioned by IBM.
But that was looking at fibre to the node.
Correct. That looked at fibre to the
home.
node, and it found a substantial benefit to the economy. We're actually going to the next generation upgrade beyond fibre to the node, and the benefits will be greater from moving to giving the country greater capacity. And so what we're seeing here is looking at the growth that there's been in demand for broadband speeds over the last 10 years. It's doubled roughly every 18 months. And if you say people are using around 5 meg speed downloads at the moment, then if you make the same assumption that it continues to grow as it has grown over the last 10 years, not an unreasonable assumption, you actually then end up with a demand in 2018 of 100 meg speeds. So unless Malcolm knows something about the Australian population nobody else knows, which is we're suddenly going to stop demanding increases in speed because of the new applications. Unless you know that, then you're saying we should stop and not go any further.
Okay, Kevin, what did you want to say?
Well, the base case in those studies is no broadband to broadband. Now we're talking about, there's one study, and I'm happy to send it to Stephen's office, from New Zealand, which says, yes, there's massive gains in going from no broadband to broadband. But when you go from reasonable speed broadband to high speed broadband, there's little discernible gain for the amount of money being spent. But can I just correct Stephen on a couple of things? He better go on the phone to Bonn tonight, because he could stop Deutsche Telekom, one of the 8th biggest telephone companies in the world, wasting billions of euros on upgrading its copper, because the copper still has good life in it. You can get on the phone to AT&T and tell them not to upgrade their copper because they're making a dreadful mistake. By 2015, their copper will be out of
Okay, one at a time. One at a time.
Jenny, can I just make this point? The big question here that both Stephen's glossing over and Kevin's trying to point out and Paul's glossing over, with great respect to them, is this. There is a big difference in terms of cost between having broadband available at, say, the best speeds available in the cities today, say on average around 10, 12, 15 megabits per second. That is regarded as fast broadband everywhere around the world. In America, the FCC, which is the Federal Communications Commission, published a huge report on broadband this year, and they say the target should be, the minimum should be 4 megabits per second across America. They are spending, in terms of federal money on broadband, taxpayers' money, 1% on a per capita basis as we are. Now, the real question, Jenny,
just let
Jenny, if I can
Malcom finish, and then I'll move on.
Yeah. So you see, there is no question that there is a big uplift in productivity to go from no broadband to say 12 megabits per second. But there is where the jury is out, and it is thoroughly unproven, is whether there is any great productivity benefit at the household level to go from, say, 12 megabits to 100 megabits. Now, that's what Stephen's spending $43 billion of your taxes on.
I've met stroke victims who will be able to be treated in their home in their rehabilitation, Malcolm, and they'll be able to do it anywhere in Australia, but only if they have the high-definition video conferencing capacity that the fibre network will build. I've met these stroke victims. They don't want to travel into cities. They don't want to travel to their rehabilitation centres at hospitals. If they can be treated at home, it is ultimately, when it comes to e-education, e-health, smart grid, sustainable technology policy, aged care and veterans care, and you could go on and on and on. And those studies, which my own department has released recently, plus the Access Economics IBM one, which you like to gloss over and say, oh, that's just about 0 to 12. It's not actually about 0 to 12.
Well, I've got it here, Stephen, we can go through it.
Those studies all show the positive benefits, and as Paul has quoted, there are studies all around the world.
Okay, I want to move on. Paul, I want to ask you that a lot of Australians already have access to relatively high broadband speeds. Do we really need to spend all the money replacing the copper system with a fibre one? Do we really need to spend that much?
I challenge you on behalf of the millions of Australians who are on dial-up in metropolitan cities, in Brisbane, in Melbourne, in Sydney, in Perth, in Adelaide, in Hobart. In Hobart, only 33%, this is about a 18-month-old figure, but only 33% of people in all of Tasmania are actually on broadband. That's 2/3 on dial-up.
Okay.
So I actually challenge your premise of your question.
Well, but quite a few people do have relatively good broadband speeds.
20% of the population, 20-25% of the population are what we now call high-speed broadband, 20-25%. But if we are going to deliver e-health services, education services, if we are going to deliver all that sort of service, are we only going to say we're only going to give it to the 25% of the people who can afford it? If we want to solve the healthcare cost in the future, we have to start looking at monitoring people from home. People can't go to retirement villages. We already have 15,000 shortage of nurses. How are we going to solve that? We need to bring broadband to people's home so that you can actually start monitoring people. And for that reason, everybody needs a connection.
Okay, I want to go to Patrick first, though, Malcolm, just behind you. Patrick, you're the headmaster of the first school in Australia to connect to the NBN in the first rollout area in Tasmania at Smithton. You already had internet access at your school, is that right?
Yes.
Tell me what difference it makes now. How is it different now that you've got this fibre network?
Okay, we were on ADSL 2. So what we found is that certainly we can upload a whole lot more. We've gone from 1 to 8 in terms of an upload. So,
what does that mean practically?
So eight times as much. So we could, for example, previously one video conference, which wasn't very good quality, took our entire bandwidth in terms of up. We could now do 8, so that's significantly faster. We also can download a whole lot more, which means that more and more of our students can be on the internet at the one time.
Okay, how else do you think you could use it?
Yeah, the potential for us, being a small school, we want to be able to link with other schools in terms of setting up classrooms. We might only have, for example, 2 students who want to do, say, physics or something. If we can get to other schools using video, conferencing, linking, we could run a much bigger class and make it more viable.
Okay, and what's it costing you?
It's actually costing us less. At the moment, we're averaging out $250 a month. For increased speed. And
is that because you're getting a special introductory deal? Is that why?
I don't believe so, but...
There's no wholesale pricing.
There's no wholesale charge. NBN's not charging at the moment.
So the ISP's just charging a retail price without a wholesale component.
Okay.
Yeah, but still, it's not going to be massively more expensive. You know?
Well, how much? The Minister can tell us. He's here right now. He can end this controversy right now.
Okay, Malcolm.
Jenny, can I just make this point? More than half of Australian schools have fibre access already. and certainly all Australian schools should have access to fibre. This is not an argument about whether hospitals or schools or the universities all have very fast broadband now. See, this is the problem with Stephen's case. He picks out one issue after another, but what it doesn't do is make the case for extending fibre to the home at a cost of $43 billion to every home. Now, can I just make this point about e-health? Now, again, we may conclude that Stephen Conroy knows all about this and the Americans are idiots, but this is the FCC of the United States study, page 210, sets out the required speeds for e-health services. And they say, even for a clinic, large physician practice with 5 to 25 physicians, 25 megabits per second. Now, you know, the bottom line is the broadband needs for the applications that will be used at the home are not at 100 megs. I'm not saying people shouldn't have 100 megs if they want to pay for it, but should the taxpayer be subsidising?
I want to give Stephen Conroy a quick response.
Wants to try and confuse the debate by talking about download speeds. To do the sort of high-definition video conferencing that Malcom is describing there in eHealth, you need to have upload capacity. And the thing about ADSL is the A stands for asymmetric, which means on copper, down speeds are fantastic, but on up speeds, they're not so good. Just like the HFC cable Malcom keeps talking about. The HFC cable in this country is configured deliberately to be 100 meg.
HFC cable for people at home
is... It's the pay television cable that they put broadband on. The HFC cable is configured deliberately to be 100 meg download speeds, 2 meg up. You cannot do most of the e-health applications that Malcom keeps trying to quote there from America.
True.
It is true.
We have to go to break.
You can't do high-definition video conference with 2 meg upload speeds.
The FCC says in 10 years' time we want 100 megabits.
Exactly. We have to go to a break. Coming up, we're going to very lively. Coming up, we're going to talk more about consumer cost, and we are also going to look at a fibre network that is already being used in Queensland to diagnose patients in regional areas. That's e-health, and that's next on Insight. Tonight we're talking about the National Broadband Network. Michael Williams, you're a doctor. You run children's services at Mackay Base Hospital, and you do use video conferencing that we've been talking about with your patients on the existing fibre network that you have there that Queensland Health uses. Manu Bobo has been having a look at how it works. Let's have a look.
Oh, that's a great view. This is the way many patients in Mackay see a specialist.
Unfortunately, in Mackay, although we're a good size, we don't have an ENT, ear, nose and throat specialist in our hospital, in the public hospital.
If you look at the telly, and then you'll be able to see your ear up there.
So this is a way of providing that service to our patients without them having to travel in the first instance.
For the Prentice family, it's the only way of finding out what's wrong with their child quickly.
You've had to fly down to Brisbane. The way we're going with financial at the moment is probably struggle, and this, I know that this will help a lot. You know, just knowing what's wrong with your kids and not having to fork out money to go down to Brisbane.
Dr. Michael Williams is the Director of Child and Adolescent Services at Mackay Base Hospital. He's been doing telemedicine consultations for 13 years.
Really, the patient, say in our district, if they were in Claremont or in Proserpine, they should have the same access, and I can deliver that to them, that same access to a paediatrician as though they were presenting here to the Mackay Base Hospital or were in our ward. And I can do that via telehealth.
Even though the specialist is seeing his sister Chanel today, 9-year-old Keelan Prentice has been through this too. If it wasn't for telemedicine, his heart problem may not have been detected as early as it was, when he was just 1 week old.
Because as soon as I had him, they sort of did it straight away. And it's just good to get the results without, worrying about going to Brisbane and just waiting to see what's wrong with him.
Detractors might say, well, you can't examine the patient, you can't lay a hand on to feel what the abdomen is like. But you're making your assessment knowing that, but you would generally try and have the GP at the other end, or in our case it would be us, and we're telling the person what we can feel on our examination.
The Prentice family won't avoid travelling the 1,100 kilometres to Brisbane altogether. 3-year-old Chanel has to have her tonsils out.
So you'll have to come to Brisbane for that.
Okay.
Now, what that means, unfortunately, is when you come here, you need to stay down here for 2 weeks after it.
Okay.
Okay, because there's a risk of a bleeding problem afterwards.
Michael, Queensland Health has a fibre network already, so how will the NBN make a difference?
Well, I think that it may be able to extend things further out, and particularly beyond the Queensland Health network, into the private medical centres, into the home. We could do follow-up of some patients in the home, and I think it will provide a better quality of the video conferencing in the home and at those sites. And indeed, when I'm on call, I might be able to get good quality provision through to looking at an emergency call from one of our outlying hospitals and assess the patient.
Okay, so more people would have access to that quality of
Yep.
picture and the quality of service.
Yes.
Yeah. Melissa and Danny, I just wondered, one of the kids is sleeping here, bless her, look at her. I just wanted to ask you both, what's it like to actually have a diagnosis done that way?
It just helps out a lot. Trying to find out what's wrong with your kids straight away without having to go down to Brisbane and with finance and that.
Because a heart problem on a baby, it was effectively, yeah? And that was all done via video conferencing.
It's actually pretty scary, but when Dr. Willis found out and then he organised that interlink, it was a lot easier and nice. Not stressful.
Patricia, I know that you live in Smithton in Tasmania where the school is, and you haven't hooked up to the NBN. How would you feel about doing video conferencing like that for health? Because older people are being cited as some of the people who could be, make use of a service like this.
Yes, I believe that it would be very good for that, yes.
So what do you think of the NBN and why haven't you hooked up?
I don't think that I could find very much use for it, that's one thing. And I do wonder about the cost of it because they were, broadband was in Smithton for 5 months, probably hooking up about 2,500 homes. And those men, they really worked. They worked through gales and sludgy sleet and they worked from sun up till sundown, and it still took them nearly 5 months.
Okay, so
there was hundreds of them.
Okay, so you're worried about the cost. Malcolm Turnbull, though, I want to ask you about what Michael says, because, I mean, if the NBN can deliver more services like that to more people and savings, because it saves money. It saves money for people having to travel, when they don't have the money. It also saves money for the system. Isn't that a compelling case for extending that coverage really comprehensively across the country?
Well, I think the first point is that Michael's got that connection at his hospital. There are about 1,300 hospitals in Australia, I think, and most of them have got broadband connection, and certainly all of them should have, just like all schools should have. The question is, and Michael said, there are a lot of mights and coulds. It could do this, it might do that. Isn't that a good reason for having a very hard-headed, careful look at this? We're spending a lot of money on infrastructure. Stephen says you need 100 megabits per second. Again, here are these Americans that Stephen doesn't think know anything. They say a single video consultation session can require a symmetric 2 megabits per second connection with a good quality of service.
But is the American system a good model for us?
Well, given that they, well, I just say this, Jenny. Jenny, I just say this. The Americans developed the internet. All of the major technology companies
Why is Obama asking for a fibre to the home network? Why is Obama asking for that?
The fact is, as I said, we've got a situation where we are undertaking 100 times more per capita government investment in this than the United States. There is no country in the world that is doing what Stephen is doing or spending the money he's doing, and nobody is doing it with so little analysis or consideration.
Stephen, response to that. No country in the world doing this.
Responses. Larry Smarr, an American, one of the founders and fathers of the internet. He comes to Australia regularly to say that what Australia is doing is the best in the world. He says if people say they can't imagine what you do with 100 megs, that's a failure of their imagination, not 100 megs.
Well, what do you have to fear from the Productivity Commission,
Tony,
Stephen?
what do you think listening to this going on? I mean, I'm just interested in what you think about the models that are being cited and the fact that we are spending all this money. Are you worried about that?
There's a political argument going on here, and it's about trying to delay the system. Let's look at the issues that we're trying to deal with in this country. We have a big land, we have people scattered across it, we have health issues, we have doctor issues, we have educational issues, we have a population debate going on in our major centres, we have business issues. The one thing that can get that right in terms of all of those issues, delivering services that are going to be scarce, aged care, keeping people in the home. We're going to have a bubble of aged care people coming through the system. What could this sort of technology do in real time to assist those people? Now, Malcom says it can happen now, but we don't know the forms of technology that will be available in 5 years' time. 3 years ago, we begged for towers in Tamworth and couldn't get any more towers. Now, Telstra was in the other day saying they're going to build another 5. The demand for some of these products and the internet products and some of the internal home products is almost exponential.
Okay, Michael, what did you want to say?
Look, we're doing some good telehealth now, and I think telehealth is great for delivering that equity of access. I think the big need now, before we start thinking too much beyond about more technology, is to get the doctors supported in the right way, with more support, with incentives to go to telehealth and directives to deliver those telehealth services with the current technology. We can do a lot more with what we've got now.
That's a whole other debate about the doctors. Kevin, what did you want to say?
There's an equity issue here. At the moment, you have 40% of the households in the lowest quintile, which is close 800,000 to 1 million households, who can't afford dial-up. They can't afford $10 a month for internet access. Now, unless Stephen can tell us right now the pricing on the NBN, and it's going to come in at below $10, those households are out. They're out of all his wonderful new world of services.
Okay, what can you tell us about the pricing, though, Stephen Conroy? Because a lot of people want to know that, and they want to know if you can guarantee that the services that they get are going to cost no more than the services they have now, in terms of broadband, for example.
Look, Kevin this morning in the newspapers described the NBN as a Ponzi scheme. So Kevin's critique continues to suffer from the fact that he was the man who put the recommendation to Kim Beazley.
Play the ball, not the man.
Kim Beazley to bring together Telstra, and we are breaking Telstra apart. Kevin's the only person in the world left in this room, Malcom Turnbull, Paul Buddy, Tony Windsor, who's actually about breaking apart Telstra are breaking apart Telstra. They're recommending it to their board, Kevin. Now, in terms of the costings, the business plan for the NBN will be out in a few weeks. And what it will demonstrate is the cost that it will be to build the network, the prices, the wholesale prices that will be on offer.
That's wholesale prices, but what can you guarantee about the retail prices? How do people know it's not going to end up being a lot more expensive?
Unless someone's suggesting we should fix and regulate retail prices, and I'm not sure Malcom would even argue that, as he's just recently not argued to allow Joe Hockey to regulate interest rates.
But
unless we're in a position that you want the government to regulate retail prices, we'll provide a wholesale package of products and prices, and when people see that, I think they'll be very relaxed.
Some of the services will be free, totally free. You don't have to pay anything. If this lady at a certain stage needs a retirement service, the ONT box, the box that's on your house, the fibre box, that doesn't cost you anything, somebody from a medical service will come in and don't link a modem to the internet, but link a modem to a monitoring service. And that can be paid for by Medicare. The education system can be paid for Medicare, by education. Smart grids will be paid for by the utilities. That's not what people have to pay. It will be packaged in that service. Okay. If the box is there, you can connect anything to it.
Kevin, response.
A couple of things. I mean, if Stephen's understanding of the Telstra network is such that a third of it is above ground at the moment, he better go out and have another look. One of the achievements of telecom and then Telstra was to put all the copper underground. Secondly, I used to work for the union that represented the technicians that maintained that copper network. And I keep in touch with those people. And go and talk to them, Stephen, because they'll tell you you'll be lucky if you can use 25% of those ducts to put fibre down. So you're going to have to string this up aerially. And as this lady said behind me about stringing it up in Smithton, you know, a few months of gales down in Tasmania, it's going to look beautiful.
Okay, can we move on? Because I want to ask about the amendments that you're moving to this Telstra split legislation, Malcolm Turnbull. And you have put forward amendments today, or the coalition has agreed to amendments today, around the legislation that splits Telstra's wholesale and retail arms. Can you explain to us why you're doing that, and is that an attempt to scuttle the NBN or demolish the NBN?
It isn't. I've got no interest in scuttling, demolishing or delaying anything. What I'm concerned about is that taxpayers' money are scarce resources. There are a lot of great things we can spend money on. We can spend money on a better hospital so that you'll have the specialists in your city and they'll not have to commute to Brisbane. We can spend money on roads, on schools, on railways. All of these things need resources. And that's why responsible governments do careful cost-benefit analyses and prioritise.
So what are you aiming to do?
Right.
What are you aiming to do? What are you aiming to do with these amendments, though?
Well, the major, there's a number of them, but I'll deal with the most important one. What the government is doing is making a deal between the NBN Co and Telstra, so that Telstra will shut down its copper network and transition its customers onto the NBN, and in addition will not use its pay television network, the hybrid fibre coax network, which passes nearly a third of Australian homes, will not use that to compete with the NBN Co. Now, the only reason for that is to protect the economics of the NBN Co, and it's going back to the bad old days of government-owned monopolies using government power to prevent people competing with it. Now, what the legislation? Can I just finish? What the legislation is trying to do?
Okay, we'll come to you.
What the legislation is seeking to do is to remove that very anti-competitive deal from the ACCC, from the provisions of the Trade Practices Act, so it cannot be considered or, vetted for competition reasons.
Tony
what
Windsor,
I'm saying
Tony
is,
Windsor, would you support those amendments?
Well, I'll listen to the debate, but I have the flavour I get in relation to whether it's the structural separation, and it should have occurred years ago.
Yeah, well, I agree with that.
And Malcolm would
dead right there.
No, I'll disagree with you, Malcolm.
No, you disagree. We disagree with you, Kevin.
Kevin's the last person standing.
Leave the European Commission.
Okay, just quickly, Tony, and then I'll go to Stephen. Okay, stop remote. Continue, Tony.
Sit.
Sit. Stay. Keep going, Tony.
Well, as I said, I think the separation should have taken place a long time ago. It didn't, and I congratulate the government for having the courage to do this, because it's not an easy thing to do, the structural separation. I'm in favour of it, have been for years.
So you won't support that kind of amendment? Have you got support for your amendments from any of the other independents?
Well, no, we're talking to all of the independents, Jenny, and you don't find out until they actually call on the vote. So,
I just wondered whether you'd had any inkling at this stage. If you don't get the amendments up, will you support the split bill? Because it's quite critical to the whole NBN.
We will consider all of these things in the legislative process. And but can I just say this? If the object of the exercise is to end the vertical integration of Telstra, then the answer is some form of structural separation. It does not require you to trash the existing copper network and build a new one.
Okay, response, Stephen Conroy.
A couple of things. Firstly, Malcolm keeps talking about this new, big, ugly government monopoly. Well, Telstra was a government monopoly for many, many years, and it has a fixed-line monopoly in the vast majority of Australia still today in private hands. This has had a disastrous impact on our broadband speeds and our broadband prices. We have lagged the rest of the world. Malcolm keeps trying to quote America. I repeat, Larry Smart, a founder of the internet, says do what Australia is doing, don't do what America's doing. You look at what's happening in South Korea, you look at what's happening in Singapore, you look at what's happening in Taiwan, you look at what's happening in Japan. These countries are laying lots and lots and lots of fibre to the home networks. So we can choose to follow along a second-rate plan in the US, or we can look at what the best technology leaders in the world are doing, like those countries I've just mentioned, and match them. Because if we say, oh, let's look at what the US are doing, we will fall further and further behind, waiting waiting to then make the decision, oh my God, we've got to do it anyway.
Okay.
So we could enjoy the stellar economic growth Japan's had for the last 20 years. They've gone nowhere in 20 years.
Okay.
I mean, give me a break,
we were about to go to some. They're very ironic. This we were about to have someone join us via Skype, but the line dropped out. Someone from Townsville, who also has a place at a place called Billiana, which is 180 k's further north of Townsville, and he was going to tell us about the problems he has trying to get a connection at all. I have to say, he's a man with an iPad, an iPhone, an Xbox Live, an iMac, an Apple TV, and a PlayStation 3. So anyway, oh, we've got him. Is he there? Wayne, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Jenny.
Oh, you're back. Tell us what your connections are like up there.
Well, in Townsville, it's not so bad. I've got a 4 megabit connection. Unfortunately, I'm stuck on what's called a REM, which means, and due to the nature of the connection, I can't get ADSL2 here at home. So that's as fast as I'll ever get. But up at Billiana, I'd literally have to hang a wireless 3G modem over a curtain rod to get any sort of signal. So it's not very good up there at all. Yeah.
Okay, so the NBN's coming to Townsville. Are you going to be signing up?
Definitely. I think Townsville, part of Townsville is already being connected now. And I think there's another 3,000 premises due to be rolled out sometime next year for stage 2. I'm not sure exactly if I'll be included in that, but I hope I am.
Well, we're glad that you could be included in this, even though we lost you there for a moment. Thanks, Wayne. We're going to go to a break, and coming up, we're going to talk about alternatives to the NBN. A little bit more on that next on Insight. Tonight we're talking about the National Broadband Network. Annabelle, you had your hand up all through the last section, and I want to involve you because you are Vice-Chancellor at UNE. Deputy Vice-Chancellor, sorry, in Armandale, one of the next rollout sites for the NBN. More than 80% of students at UNE use distance learning, is that right?
About 70% of them use distance learning.
Okay,
yes.
What's it going to mean for them?
It's going to make a huge difference to them. At the moment, much of the interaction between the students, those distant students and the university, is really passive. There's some active interaction, that is, we can send them material through chat rooms, for example, we can get material back that way. But all of those students who study off-site miss the real experience that comes from tutorials, for example, at the university. The interaction between different students, the interactions between the student in real time with their lecturer, and the discussions that go around that. That's all very, very important part of the learning experience of the people that are on the university campus. They miss that if they're not on the campus. With broadband, we can have a virtual classroom. We can have a tutor, maybe in Armidale, maybe somewhere else in the world, anywhere. We can also have students joining that particular tutorial from anywhere, again, around Australia or internationally for that matter, if we choose to. They can actually then take part in a real classroom experience. So it makes it a much more powerful learning experience for those people.
Okay, I just wonder, listening, the rest of you have been listening to this debate, and a lot of it's been political, but there's been a lot about the actual services and everything as well. I just wonder what you all think listening now that we're coming to the end of it, and how you feel about the NBN, having listened. Patricia.
Could I ask the Minister how much it actually costs to service Smithton?
How much it would cost you to get
Not me personally, but how much did the taxpayer pay to service Smithton?
To service Smithton. Can you answer that, Stephen?
The first release sites in Tasmania was a contract that's broken into a couple of bits. So we've built a whole large amount of backbone of the network. So the backbone, the operations centre, and a whole host of other things that will service all of Tasmania were included in the cost of the first contract. So the first contract was just over $30 million, but that was actually putting in place the backbone, the electronics, the operations centre, and a whole host of things that were for the whole of Tasmania.
Okay, now the take-up rate's been described as low in Tasmania.
They're not low at all.
What is it, 11%?
The McKinsey study said that if we get between 6 and 12%, in 12 months, we'll have a financially viable company. We've got 11% in 3 months. We're ahead of schedule. If you look at Armidale, we're up in the high 70s. If you look at Wollonga, we're in the 87% of residents of a small country town of Wollonga in South Australia have signed up for the National Broadband Network to be connected.
Okay, Annabelle, what did you want to say?
Stephen's made my point, but in Armidale, it's an opt-in system. You have to voluntarily sign up for it. It's actually up to, I think, about 85% as well.
Okay, Malcolm Turnbull? I mean, the opposition's been having a go about this low take-up rate.
There are two issues here. The first one is it a good thing to have widely available broadband? We are all in favour of this. I mean, you know, trying to turn this into a debate about is broadband good or bad is like having a debate about are roads good or bad. We're all in favour of good roads, but we nonetheless do our homework and make sure that the big road we're going to build is in the right place, the right design and the right cost. And that's really what this debate is about.
Okay, Paul?
I have been involved since 2005, Malcolm. Helen Coonan, one of the previous ministers, we worked perfectly with her. Yeah? For the last 3 years, where have you been? We've had debates. I've invited you personally. I've invited the opposition year after year after year. Please participate in the discussion. I had the Digital Economy Industry Group, 400 people, yeah, all working together. We invited you, you never were home. All these people together, all these specialists together, Communications Alliance, Telstra, Optus, all of them together come to the conclusion that this is the best technology. Why are you questioning that now?
Okay, answer from you, Malcolm.
There are a number of options, a number of ways we can achieve the policy objective that we all agree on.
No, but what about the question of consultation? I mean, are you meeting with people that? Paul's suggesting that you're not.
Yes, but not in the last 3 years.
I meet with people all the time. Look, can I just say this to you? And I don't claim to be an expert, but I have been involved in the telecommunications industry, not just as a co-founder of AussieMail, the first big ISP in Australia. I've been a director of a big subsea cable joint venture between Hong Kong Tel, PCCW and Telstra. I've advised Telstra, I've advised Optus, I've been involved in the telecommunications sector, one way or another, for 20 years. So I don't claim to be an expert, but for Paul to suggest that I've only just come to the field tonight is absurd, and he knows it's absurd.
Okay, can I ask what you're offering as an alternative? What is the opposition offering?
Okay, what we think should happen is that firstly, we should rectify immediately the areas that are not being adequately served. In the regions, to deliver a combination of technologies, satellite in the very remote areas, fixed wireless and others, upgrading the fixed line network in others. But we've got to make sure that wherever you live in Australia, you get access to broadband, fast broadband at affordable prices. In the cities, for example, the gentleman who was on the 4 megabit per second connection from Townsville can't get ADSL2, can't get a faster service. Those areas where, because of network architecture problems from the past, you can't get the faster speeds, they can be rectified. Now, all of that can be done for a fraction of $43 billion, and yet nobody here from the government is prepared to put their contention that the NBN is the best answer to the test of the Productivity Commission or Infrastructure Australia.
Stephen, response?
There are 1.2 million Australians who are handicapped by pair gain systems, and the only way to get around that is, as Hugh Bradlow, the Chief Technology Officer for Telstra, has said publicly many times, fibre to the home is the end game. It's the future-proof. It's building the capacity so that as new applications come online, whether they be e-education, e-health or entertainment, you can take them up. So what Malcolm is saying, let's just incrementally creep up. What we need to do is make a major leap to get Australia to the top of the technology table. And that's, as a small country, a long way away from everywhere else, with a population as dispersed as ours, we need to get the best. We want to build a world-class system. Malcolm wants to put together a patchwork network, which is what the opposition's policy has been for years.
Okay, we have to wrap up quickly, Kevin.
Look, Stephen wants us to, be up there with Taiwan and Japan, and do you know what companies are building fibre networks there? The equivalent of Telstra. The Japanese government wouldn't be stupid enough to break up NT&T. It wants it to invest, and it has invested.
It's investigating it.
It's investigating it right now.
People have been investigating those things for years, and when they push comes to shove, they say it's a silly idea, the costs outweigh the benefits.
The European Union has now dictated that
functional
in Europe
separation,
you have to start
totally
doing
different. Functional separation is a totally different thing than you know that, Paul. It's misleading to suggest.
Tony Winsey is sitting there looking like this at these two. What's your response to that debate, that discussion?
No, well, look,
and to Malcolm's
I couldn't
proposal.
listen to two people at once. I'm a man.
And what about?
I'd like to pick up on a point Malcolm made earlier. In terms of benefit-cost analysis, and he recognises that they're only as good as the assumptions you put in. But Malcolm, your government supported the Adelaide to Darwin railway line. The benefit-cost analysis said it was a dud. It is a dud.
So you want to build another dud, an even bigger dud?
Don't suggest that your economic credentials are perfect in relation to that. All members of the Parliament at the moment, including yourself, are supporting the inland rail concept. Is that true?
Well, it's got wide support.
Well, the optimisation study that was done suggests that it's not a financial proposal. Obviously, it will be once it's built, and I think that's the point we have to really look at here. If we provide the backbone, particularly given some of the health and educational services, the aged care services that are going to be required into the future, a lot of the technology will go to that backbone. And I think this is something that, particularly from regional Australia, we shouldn't miss. And I just cannot understand country people arguing against this. This is the one thing that takes your own location out of the game.
We have to go, I'm afraid. We have to go.
Yeah.
We have to stop. We've run out of time, but we will keep going online. We're going to keep talking online. Malcolm, I'm sure you'll do that. I'm sure various other people are going to be around to do that. And you can keep talking online to Paul Butter and to Kevin Morgan. Just jump onto our website and click on our live chat. Insight is repeated on Friday at 1:30, again on Monday at 2:30 on SBS 1 and at 7:30 Thursday night on SBS 2. Thank you everybody very much for this discussion tonight. It will continue. Next week we're going to look at anti-Islamic sentiment, which is on the rise across Europe and the United States. Join us with international and local guests as we explore why. That's next week. Till then, good night.